to regain freedom and to get us released. This is everyone and each of you who knew about us, who advocated for us. And then if we go globally, it's big organizations and the governments. On a personal level, I will start not from imprisonment time, but every day now. What happens next after you get released? It's not easy. I start my morning with opening my eyes and being grateful that I open my eyes in my own bed, free. This a glass of water, of clean water that I can drink, the shower I can take, the doors I can open and the doors I can close when I need them to be closed. Those things, it's been over a year since I was released, and I don't think they will go away. Maybe they might fade, but they don't go away. This is how I live now. And before I got arrested 2 years ago, I had been doing regional journalism for a particular Volga region in Russia with the Radio Free Europe. I've been an editor for many years. I was working with people on the ground. We had teams in that region. So it's not that I knew, or of course I knew about the risks. Our journalists there were always under danger, facing danger of not imprisonment yet, but of harassment and being detained. There were situations they were briefly detained, and as an editor, I would always know where they were, what they were doing, but they were always working legally on proper journalistic assignments and editorial control. So I was living their life. I knew how dangerous it was to be there. I knew everything, of course, got much worse after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in terms of coverage of Ukraine. And see, for example, one very short example from like before the arrest live, we had a journalist in a very far away region of Russia covering an event, and suddenly he disappeared, and his wife called me, and I lost track of him. And this was way before the war, but there was an opposition rally, so I knew he was working there. I knew already from other local journalists who I was in touch with that he was taken to police station. His wife called me saying, and they have little children, and said, and asked, any chance I can't call my husband, like, do you know where he is? And I knew where he was. And it was 7 p.m., and it was even later there in Russia, and I started talking her through that evening, say, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I need to cook dinner for my children, but I'm so distracted, I don't know where he is. I said, hey, let's start cooking. I was also making dinner for my children in Prague. So let's start cooking together, and meanwhile, we will find him. And meanwhile, on the other phone or notebook, I was, you know, like hectically searching where he might be. And then, so doing that, in a couple of hours, we found him. He was released. That journalistic assignment, editorial assignment, helped. There were times when actually journalism was legal in that country. So it helped. We made dinner, we fed our children, her husband came home back. And you know, and then I remember going to bed, like it was such an achievement that I did this, but I've always lived like this. And then when I ended up myself in that dark cell, my first thought was, oh my gosh, how did we end up here? We knew this was coming. We journalists, we knew. We were warning the whole world. Why did this come? And then, of course, the rest, like everyday routine, how we focused, and we can share prison stories here, which doesn't matter which country they are from, they are very similar.
What are you thinking?
Open. So how do you survive prison or how do you go your day-to-day activity after all these tough times? In some ways, just like what she said, you cherish the very small things, what you always take it for granted. For example, you know, you stayed in a very dark prison for the whole day or the whole night. And when you are allowed to go out for 10 minutes every day just to see the sky, I am just staring on that sky for, from the whole time. And when you are allowed to go to toilet, for example, that one also is very, you thought that these things are, it's your freedom, so that no one will take it from you, and you just end up there. We always thought, as a journalist, we always read stories about people who are arrested, who are abused, or who are, governments are always do whatever they want. But when you are end up at that prison, you just personally, facing that problem. So the most difficult thing is that maybe being end up in prison, you might be survived in one way. But when you go out, there is also another very big challenge you face with the realities. It's very difficult to continue your work as it is because things are changed. Your sources are afraid to communicate with you. Government officials are very scared to talk to you. So sometimes even, after my release, you see pure surveillance, obvious surveillance wherever you go. So it is very difficult to continue as you work. But I always said that, my passion for journalism, if you wanted to make a difference, if you wanted to do something that is valuable, and that how a country like us, there is you don't get that much of independent media in our country. So if you don't do that, who will do it?
Yeah, it strikes me, one thing that the two of you do have in common in your cases is that you were each in your own way charged with disseminating false information. In your case, it was about the invasion and the war and Russian casualties and Russian opposition. In your case, it was other kinds of information. How do you understand the growing use of this idea of disseminating false information, whether it was to imprison yourselves or to attack colleagues? What has been happening with that in Ethiopia? How did that come to be a charge that could get you in jail?
When the latest one, because I am arrested 3 times. So I think authoritarian governments, they always pick the buzzword of the time. So false information, fake news is coming, I think, after Trump administration. Previously, it was terrorism. Mm-hmm. So 10 years ago, terrorism was a very big thing. I was charged with terrorism.
Right. As I said earlier, you and Osama bin Laden.
Yes.
Right?
With the same word. So at one time, it was terrorism. At one time, inciting violence. Now it becomes disseminating false information. You know what? The last time, the latest one was when I was arrested, I was talking over the phone, and some plainclothes officers are sitting just beside me, and police came, and after that, they just took me from a hotel after I ate my lunch.
And was it a particular story, or was it for the whole direction of your current work?
It is the whole, the whole direction of my work. Our media is targeted repeatedly because of our critical stories. Mm-hmm. But at that day, there was a little bit, you can say, disturbance or riot in the middle of the capital city of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So I was going around to see how things are there, to report and to see the area. So that might be the reason. And we repeatedly targeted in so many ways. Yeah.
And talk a little bit about what disseminating false information meant in your case.
Mm-hmm. In my case, it was a strictly wartime legislation that was introduced in Russia after invading Ukraine. It's about covering the war. Saying that it's a war is crime. Counting and talking and reporting on Russian casualties is crime. Reporting on different cases of attacks on Ukraine is crime. There's particular cases, but the book was, and I don't want to go into the book. The book is history already. I'm so happy we did it at that time because there were people who contacted us when the invasion started from Russia, from regional Russia, saying we want to talk, we want to be. So we realized that they want to be part of the community when the whole country is saying that, or TVs and propaganda is saying that we are liberating Russians that, and you know, whatever causes they named for the war, there were people, lots of people saying, no, we protest this war. This is not a fair war. It's not our war. And they wanted to talk to us. They gave their real names. And I felt that if we don't publish that in a book, those voices will be lost. And we did that. I co-edited that book. So that was the reason why I was, one of the reasons why I was arrested.
Yeah.
It's just a reason, you know, they just come up with this type of accusations.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm curious, do each of you think, looking back, that your arrests were somehow inevitable or almost inevitable, or were there particular markers that made the moment more dangerous?
Well, look, in my case, I traveled there to see my ailing mom.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a dual American and Russian national. I thought I was going to back to my home country, not for reporting, not for work, just bringing medication to my mom. I wouldn't think that they will dare to arrest me at that point. I would always think that, yeah, they could detain me, they could stop me from boarding the plane, just to talk to me. This is what had happened before, not with me, but with other colleagues, but I wouldn't think that they would dare to arrest me. Could I have not gone? Maybe, but I knew that my mom is aging, she's old. I knew that she might not survive another year or another season. You know, I mean, it was a battle between mind and soul. It's
well,
just,
and there's no doubt that I would say, I know for those of us who are press freedom advocates outside of Russia, it was clear that your arrest marked an escalation. It was not something anyone expected.
yes,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
I said it is inevitable because, you know, Ethiopia is a very known jailer of journalists, one of the worst in Africa.
Yep.
Every time when the CPJ's prison census come out, you know, we are always maybe second or third in that list. So I might end up one day in prison, but I always believe that if I do professional journalism, if I do fact reporting, and you know, if I stick with the ethical standards and everything, they might not come after me. But I was wrong.
Yeah. You know, when colleagues like you are arrested, those of us in this room often will focus a lot of attention, and this panel is called the ultimate test because in some ways it is a moment when the press freedom community has an opportunity to intervene, and we discover quickly what the strengths and weaknesses of our strategies are, right? But we don't often think about the people who are connected most intimately to you, your own families. In the time that you two have spent either locked up or in criminal processes, what kinds of support have mattered to your families? I'll circle back to you. But what has mattered, what has helped the people in your lives get through these times?
Interestingly enough, my husband, who led the advocacy campaign together with my colleagues at Radio Free Europe and with support of the biggest freedom, press freedom group, CPJ, RSF, and others, and the governments, he took a decision to isolate the family, and I have two teenage daughters, from outside influence. So, of course, there was this rush to take them out to pizza, you know, like help financially. And he said no. And I actually, even in prison, got a couple of letters from people I knew that we tried to help, but your husband said no. So, and so I think that was also a response to trauma. So, so he knew he was in charge. He was controlling that, but only thanks to that they had a discipline within the family to live through those hard times. You know, like stay strong physically and mentally. Of course, they had all the resources to, if they wanted, if they needed, to go through therapy or something. But I'm so happy They didn't need that. But in terms of families and loved ones, what I want to say, because when I got back, I started working for advocacy. We still have journalists in Russia, and recently four journalists were released from Belarus. I'm talking about Radio Free Europe now, and so I'm very closely working with their families and them. Families, I would say, in all that industry of releases and imprisonment, loved ones are the most important people. If that component is missing, the imprisoned person loses everything, insanity, everything. Yes, we journalists, we hope that the outside world is fighting for us. Eventually, we might come out sooner or later. But if you don't have that component, it's fatal. It's really dangerous. This is what I know from my experience with working with others.
Yeah.
Definitely, the loved ones, the family, they are the most burdened when you are going to prison. So international organizations, the type of advocacy, they gave it to us, they gave it to me. It really helps for them, to understand the value what we are trying to do, because always the government is, the first thing what they do is tarnishing your image. They are trying to associate with you something like a foreign agent, or something like color revolution, or something dismantle the constitutional order of the country. These are like a very complicated words for individuals, ordinary people to understand this, to grasp this. But when international organizations, when they are trying to advocate on behalf of you, it gives a hope for your beloved ones. Sometimes you will get you'll be released or like that. And financially also, when it comes to, for example, legal aid, these organizations are the one who do communication with the friends, fellow journalists and families to support this. If it is not for that one, it is very difficult to survive in a country like Ethiopia.
Yeah. Now I want to take you briefly, I think, into the periods of your incarcerations. How much did you know about the efforts being done on your behalf? How much did you know? How much did you guess at? How much were you in the dark about? I think this is something many of us are curious about sometimes.
I have a very funny, anecdote for that one. The first 3 months, for example, when we were arrested for the first time, it was a group of bloggers and journalists who were arrested together. It's called Zone 9 collective group. So we were not allowed to be seen by our family for 3 months. No lawyers visit, no family visit. We don't have any information about the outside world. We cannot even go outside to see the sun, as I said before, for 10 minutes. So at one time, I came up with an idea. I asked my guard, please take me to the library. The library is very small. The collection of books they have is very small, but this is just like an idea to see the newspapers in the library. So we went there. I just said my cellmates, let us go together, because I wanted to save some time to read newspapers. So while searching their books, I just opened the recent publication, and I see that John Kerry, the American Foreign Secretary, he was advocating about us, and I was seeing the newspaper on that one, and I told all my friends in the cell, about that, because when they are arrested they will not keep you in one place. They divided in different cells. So as soon as I returned back from the library, I told them that, listen, John Kerry said like this. So it gives you a hope.
Well, in my case, I was isolated from information and contacted my family for a very long time. Actually, I didn't have any contacts with my family. But how I learned about that something was happening. So I was a couple of months already in prison. And suddenly, I was held in an unheated cell, October, November, December, really bad times in Russia, very cold. We were all sick. There was no medication. And then suddenly when I thought that the conditions cannot be worse, they suddenly transferred me to like a horrible, horrible cell. And then later told me, the guards told me that usually they don't put women to that cell, but they did. So I spent Christmas, New Year's, 2 months there. And actually, it was at that time when the first biggest events of the advocacy campaign started in DC, in Europe. The Czech foreign minister called from the UN stage to release me. In America campaign, my husband started giving interviews in major networks. This is when it started. And in prison in Russia, just in case, they didn't know what to do, so they completely isolated me. At that time, I didn't know why that happened, but when my lawyer came to see me, to visit me, he told me that this is happening, and he was so surprised that the reaction of the guards was there to put me even to worse conditions. But eventually, it was hard, I don't want to talk about that, but eventually when you know that this is happening, you see the bigger picture, and you know why they are doing it, and it made me happy.
Just how long were you in that particular harsh cell?
So in total, I was in prison for 9.5 months, and in 6 months I was in really, really bad conditions. The last 3 months were in a bigger cell with many women prisoners. At least the bathroom, the toilet door could close. And there were at least some, the showers were not 6 minutes, but say 8 minutes, a little bit better. So
Yeah. Let me ask something about the transition out, the after, and also you started out by talking a little bit about the after. Maybe talk a bit about what kinds of support were important in the immediate period of your leading up to and after your release. What really has mattered?
Yeah, the first thing I think I can say is that to create a safe environment for journalists, they need some space, they need some quiet time with themselves, because it's very difficult. The environment is very hostile. When you go out, you think that everyone is talking about you, everyone is advocating for you. It happens, but when you go out, the environment is different. The government is against you, people scared to talk to you and like that. And, when you just come out, phones are different, people are different, things are different in so many ways. So journalists, when they come out, they don't directly go back to their work, so they need some time. So they need some consultation, maybe a retreat to some country, or just to reflect what was happening in their area, in their stay. I think that's one of the things that's needed. I took, for example, on my first release, 3 months without work, and after that I get back to work.
Yeah.
Well, it's basically rebuilding your whole life, starting with renewing your documents that expired, your driving license, bank account, those kind of things. It takes time, and going through all those medical checkups, and in my case, say, I had to improve my health significantly. When I got back, I didn't feel well. And those kind of rebuild relations with your children, with your spouse, with your friends. Yeah, my environment is totally different right now. I have great people around me, but I also lost lots of people. And not necessarily that they don't support me or they don't like me, but they moved forward, I moved forward. We have different values maybe we do share some values, but sometimes I see people that I think I want to see and I missed, and then in 5-10 minutes you realize that, okay, I'm happier, if everything is fine, just, those kinds of things. And there are lots of things that trigger us in you know, after, and which I was told by many experienced in journalists who were released many years ago. They said, well, also I'll tell you something, this will never go away. So sounds, smells, some kind of words, but every time when I feel something like that, I go back and say, wow, I'm so happy to be free, to acknowledge that and to be able to change that. If there is a smell that I don't like or triggers me, I can just leave. If there is a noise, if there's a person that I don't like, I can just leave, which we couldn't do in prison.
I think the most difficult thing is to go back to prison to visit your cellmates and some other journalists. I always do like that. Whenever I released, the second day, what I do is go back to the same place and to visit my friends, because it gives a hope for these people. And whenever I heard some journalists are arrested in Ethiopia or detained, I felt very bad. I felt it very connected to them. So whenever you go back there, old memories are coming back again, and it's very tough. You know, sometimes you see the same prison warden or guard who treat you in a very bad way. They are just in front of him. So it's very difficult.
I have kind of a reporter question, actually, for all of you, for both of you. As reporters, when we go through complicated things, we actually sometimes learn stuff that helps our reporting. Yeah. There's things we didn't know before that change the way we go about reporting. Is there anything in the whole sweep of this experience that you've taken away that's changed your reporting a little bit, that made you report differently or have different interests in your reporting, or just something you've learned that is a kind of craft evolution as a result of this experience?
Well, I hope I didn't learn this way, but again, my mind changed, or I trained my mind after a couple of months of my arrest, saying that I'm here, this is the moment, I have to live this moment. So yeah. I started connecting to women in prison, talking to them. And of course, there are real criminals, there were actually very interesting people there who got there because, not exactly because of their crime, but of crimes of others. I didn't want to go into investigation of their cases, but there were personal stories. And actually, I spent a lot of years of covering women issues, ethnic minorities, and I just saw my heroes, the characters of my reports in those cells, you know, yeah. Victims of domestic violence, victims of corruption, or those kind of things. And this is how I felt better. This is how I really love to connect. And my biggest award there was that after hours of conversation in a cell, that somebody would say, wow, also this is the first time I'm sharing this with someone. And this was like the biggest award, I would say thank you.
And so what's striking about that is that you brought your curiosity and your craft as a journalist with you into prison. It was a source of a source of support for women you were incarcerated with, as well as
myself,
as well as something for yourself.
Absolutely.
You didn't stop being a journalist.
Absolutely, yes. And then keep my mind busy. Of course, when I didn't have access for months to books, yeah. I would read ingredients on the food packages, and they were, you know, how there are different languages, and I love languages, and I can read most of them except Armenian. And then so Armenian, I was writing down like beautiful letters without knowing what they meant. And now imagine my excitement when one day the cell door opened and an Armenian prisoner showed up. And she wouldn't understand why I was so happy to see her, of course. I said, like, good, look, I have something for you, just sit down, can you translate? And so this is how I learned sugar and fat in Armenian. So just to keep mind busy. It's just, I wish I didn't learn that in prison, but it's very important.
But you are such a reporter, and we bring who we are to these encounters. did you learn anything through these experiences that has changed you as a reporter, or what as being a reporter did you bring into it?
Yeah, of course, definitely, because prisons are a place where all walks of people from different walks of life come together without their willingness. So you meet so many people, protesters, political prisoners, former government officials, intelligence people. It is sometimes the type of stories you heard in the evenings are really, really. Sometimes we didn't even sleep because we just listening the type of stories they told you is really amazing. But the other thing is that it gives me a perspective on my country's political situation, because I am born and raised in the capital city. Okay. So Ethiopia is a very big country, 120 million people. The population is big. So they came from different backgrounds. So when we stay together, they tell you so many things, so many stories about their specific locations. So you learn a lot about that. The second thing is about the justice system. The justice system, you might report about the court system and like that. But when you are personally affected by that, so next time when you are covering stories about the justice system, the court, the trial reporting and everything is totally shifted after that. And human rights abuses. The type of things what you heard in prison is really, really terrible. And how prisons are crowded in African countries, you can expect. So basic human rights, you gave too much emphasis after that, because you have seen it. You are a first-hand account witness.
I'm going to ask you one or two other things, and then we'll maybe go to the room for a few questions. We are at a time when in a number of countries around the world, the threats of arrest and other persecution of journalists is on the rise. Authoritarianism is on the rise. If you two were to prepare a tip sheet for colleagues working in situations in which arrest is a realistic possibility, in which a period of incarceration is a realistic possibility, for them or for their colleagues, tip sheet for journalists or for newsrooms in challenging situations, what might be in that tip sheet? I mean, I will start out with one thing that a great early 20th century U.S. journalist, George Seldes, said. His advice was, tell the truth and run. That was his advice. But, I mean, seriously, what would be one or two things that would go into a tip sheet to help people plan ahead for the possibility or understand how to get through what they might be facing?
Well, since what happened to me, I put safety first, then breaking news or that kind of thing. I know I might speak against my profession right now and eliminate some risk, but it's just safety first. But if you agree to take the risk and realize that this might happen, to make sure that you have your back with your newsroom, with your editors, with the security team, depending on who you work with. Of course, not all journalists can afford, I guess security training, yeah, we can afford, all of us, but security teams, or, we can't, then build that network of people who will get you out. And those are big organizations, small people, connections, just because we have our backs always. And you know what happens? Like, we journalists are very competitive, right? This is what drives us to success. But when it comes to advocacy, and I really saw this great solidarity, and I keep seeing it because I need that solidarity in my work right now, and I see that immediately people react to any kind of request. So build that network of journalists, and physically, go running, gym, exercising, because mentally, I'm not worried about journalists in prisons, about their mental health, not that much. Most of them are very strong. But physical health has limits, and that's dangerous.
I share most of the things what she said. One of the things is preparing emergency contacts. That's the main thing, because on my first arrest, I don't know anything about such a thing. But after that, I always have emergency contacts. And I always told that if I disappear, because I disappear on the second arrest, if I disappear for 48 hours, just release that Tesfalem was disappeared. And it was appeared like that, by the way. My friend is the one who come to Twitter, and he said is that the last time he was seen was reporting on site, and after that, no one saw him. And people are scrambled to find me in different police stations and like that. It took some 3 days to find me. So emergency contact is the first thing. And the second one is when people go to prison, the first 24 to 48 hours is very critical, because they wanted to break you at that time. They will come after you on different things. So if you are strong enough just to stay strong in those period of time, you'll survive prison after that. So remembering that one is very needed. And also the lawyers and all that. If something happened on you, what shall they do? Because sometimes they will keep you without your family might not visit you right away, or your lawyers cannot be accessed to you. So, just try to solve that is another necessary thing.
I think both of you are talking about being realistic about the situation you are in, and making very concrete and specific plans with yourself, if we're taking care of yourself, but also the plans with colleagues and other things. Really being realistic about what might happen, right?
Just to jump in, and those are emergency means, right?
Yeah.
We can address this in a bigger scale, so journalists are not arrested and not detained. This is something for a different discussion of, on government's level about considering detention of journalists as wrongful detention is like bringing up legislations. I know this is a different venue, and but just I keep saying that at every part, because with what we do, this is emergency response. We cannot live in this emergency mode for forever. It has to be addressed on a higher level.
And I do think that both on this level of arbitrary arrest and detention, wrongful incarceration, just as on the level of war crimes and attacks on journalists in conflict, there are not a lot of legal protections that are specifically targeted toward protecting journalists. And that certainly is an area over the coming years that folks are going to need to address. Right, recognizing the journalists are not just have a role and undertake risks that are special and different from civilians or every citizen. There's a distinct role for journalists that deserves protection. Let's do a couple of questions. I may have one or two more. And I don't know, is there a mic in the room for questions, or are we just going to shout out? Let me just say, remember that a question is typically a short sentence followed by a question mark, okay? Because there are a lot of people who I'm sure are going to want to say stuff.
I fully agree as a journalist with you that that's a question, but I cannot but say I'm an Armenian and we have a prime minister who is a journalist and a former political prisoner. Yeah. So I wonder how your communication would be with him, whether it would be as a journalist or as Armenian. My question is, what were your relations with the other inmates? Did you sort of take the role of the rights defender inside just because you had the knowledge of laws and stuff? And I don't know much about Ethiopia in sense of the jail community, but in former Soviet space, there is, all kinds of sort of criminal, subordination and all that. Was there a special attitude towards you? Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Both of you, please.
There wasn't special attitude. I was failing to be a proper prisoner because I didn't know the structure. I didn't know the rules. I accidentally sat down on somebody's bunk bed, and I was almost punished for that. And somebody then helped me to solve the situation. There were those kinds of things. And then I was, I always share things. If I have coffee or hot chocolate, I will share the whole cell. Apparently, that was a mistake, because next time when I I returned to the cell, all coffee was gone, and I didn't have my coffee for a month and a half because was when the next parcel food package was scheduled. So I definitely was like, I didn't belong there. But again, my journalistic skills, ability to connect to people, learning languages or trying to find something in everyone. Like imagine a prisoner comes and she or she, they were women, totally an outcast, drug addict or somebody. But you are in a small cell with that person and you have to be there 24/7. Somehow you connect. You have to connect. Not everybody succeeded, of course. I was fine. Nobody understood why I was there because it was such a shock. I would share my stories of my life in Prague and my children, and they wouldn't understand. But those were those kind of criminals. But I spent a couple of months in another part of prison, like more maybe privileged one, where they were economic and financial criminals. They were different. They spoke languages. They traveled around the world. They owned businesses. That kind of it was there wasn't less intimidation and harassment. No, it was a different scale, but at least there were different stories to tell and share.
In Ethiopian prisons, there is always a special treatment for political prisoners, and journalists are included in that group. So we are always treated as like the people who are make accountable of the government. So everyone give you a respect. You have a special treatment in some ways. And also because our visitors are much higher compared to the others, because many people come to the prison. So we share so many things, just like what she said. So that one also build a relationship with other prisoners. And we help it, for example, we review their legal cases also. Because we read, we can access to books, criminal code or something like that. So we are trying to give their cases to our lawyers also, other lawyers also. So that one is also really helping them. Some of them are stayed in prison because of lack of bail. Very small amount of money. So because of our connecting with people, with lawyers, they get released and they are really happy. So it's just like that.
Anyone else? Yes. Go ahead. And then we'll go over here.
Hi. I'm from Hong Kong and I run a press union in Hong Kong. My question for any one of you is if there is a journalist who is disappeared, we believe they're in detention, but their family actively do not want outside help or any attention. After 2 years, what's your advice for an advocacy group in that situation? Yeah, any insight on that?
Yeah, we at Radio Free Europe had such cases whose family didn't want public advocacy, and we kept it confidential, and it worked as well. We succeeded to get released. Because, public advocacy is part of advocacy. It's something that it's seen. In the cases like mine, it was very important. In some cases, it's not that important. And it's also, it's a very creative work. It's a very sensitive work. But the what family thinks matters a lot, because if they don't want to put themselves under danger, it's very important. But there are ways to work through that too.
Have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, respecting the privacy of the family is, I think, it should be crucial on this case. But for example, in Ethiopia, when journalists are arrested, the first thing everyone is trying to do is as soon as possible to be, contacting government officials and like that. Safety first. They should be released in one way or another. Sometimes it helps. Before you report that the arrest of that journalist, they might be released. because governments, they don't like reports of journalists are arrested. Sometimes there might be a miscommunication, misunderstanding between this and that. But in case of 2 years and like that, for me, I always believe that advocacy, public advocacy is a must. It should be done. But if the family preferred in that way, I always respect. We have such some cases like that. It's quiet, everything is quiet. We always keep doing pressure behind the scene. So we always go, we always mention that, this guy is still in jail. Please do something, when foreigners coming, for example, sometimes we have the privilege to meet with government officials when they travel to our country. So they have an influence, they have the money. So they influence the government. So whenever we have got the opportunity to sit down one-on-one, off the record type of discussion, we always raised such type of cases.
I would just add one quick thing, and then we'll go over here. Remember, too, first of all, that families are often complex, and there may be divisions within them that we're not going to see as outsiders, and we just need to respect that. But also that families caught up in traumatic experience may change their view over time. So you stay in touch and see if it changes, right?
I'm from Bangladesh, so I represent one of the English newspaper. One of my colleague, he's in jail for last 6 months. So basically, he published news regarding the corruption and the some kind of uprising of the Islamist extremists. But after that, he was detained, and long time we didn't trace him. But beside this, there is another scenario. This our National Press Club president, he is also disappeared, and as well as the Secretary General in the prison. Near about 380 journalists are facing murder cases charges. This is some of them in the prison. So my question to you, this is the national crisis for our media. So I think we are failed to do something in my country. Is there any kind of scope for the international community can help us this regard? Thank you very much.
You've been thinking a lot about journalism, advocacy for incarcerated journalists. What are you thinking?
Yes, and yes, and we should help. And we hear the big community, advocacy community, because look, it's something that happens in Bangladesh won't stay in Bangladesh. It will spread, and it is spread, and probably it came to Bangladesh from somewhere else, right? It's not that something new, because these are the signs that journalists will be imprisoned starts much earlier. They say, for example, I wasn't imprisoned in a day. It started as making my work worse and worse, it's just like impossible to work, and this is how it started. So probably it started early. Mm-hmm. Yes, the international community should step in and do something to do public advocacy, start working with businesses, and businesses actually.
No, but one thing, we had a good dream about the our Nobel laureate Dr. Muhammad Yunus, when we changed the government after the uprising of the student movements like Gen Z. Yeah. But we had a expectation that this government will be better than earlier. But we think that is more worse than earlier. So then, in that case, nationally we have nothing to do. We need the international cooperation. Yeah. Otherwise, it's very difficult to handle this.
Yes.
This is the biggest crisis. And yesterday I also tried to raise this issue because of the IPI should come down with their resolution, because this is the Guinness Books record. There are 380 journalists under the murder case charge. A journalist who writes by pen, he cannot be come down with the weapons. That's the reality in my country. So
yeah, this is the perfect example when the journalists in one country they cannot deal themselves, and this is when always step in.
I will just say that the international press freedom advocacy community is big and active, and there are many pathways in, but also every case, in my experience anyway, every arrest is different.
No,
every
but
case is different.
One problem is there. Those are representing the like Reporters Without Border or other organizations. They are staying in Dhaka. They are staying in my country. If them ask them, they are in they are in pressure. They cannot give you the right answer. You have to go your own way, investigate and find out the reality, what's going on there.
I think you're asking an excellent question for which there's not an easy answer. Let's do maybe one more question, and then yes, go ahead.
Thanks. Oliver Buddyco, International Press Institute. We're in the middle of a campaign, Free Mazir Amaglobi, who will receive one of the Press Freedom Awards this evening. What advice or what warnings can you give to those involved in this campaign? What mistakes might we make? And I think you mentioned earlier about you knew when the campaign went live because they put you into an even worse cell. I don't know if there's any sort of advice you can give to those on the outside.
And that actually anticipates a closing question I was going to have for you that relates very much, which is, what do we in the international press freedom advocacy community, what should we be doing differently? What have you experienced or learned that we could take away to make our campaigns more effective?
Well, thank you for that question. Zia is my hero. I wrote a letter to her myself, and I mean, she will be out eventually. She needs to hold on and save herself and survive, and she's great. Maybe what we can do, we are doing great things already, and study each case, each case, and make a structure of what had happened and how we can prevent this in future. Again, some people should work on a higher level, maybe not us, but some people who have direct contacts with businesses, high tech, and the governments, to pressure them so this doesn't happen at all, in future.
But I also think this thing you said, study each case, and I think that's important. I think there is a rush sometimes to the next emergency.
Well, yeah, because they are happening. But yeah, we should take time to study each case. Or, I mean, that's very important to have a case study. Yeah.
I think I can share one good example of how such type of advocacy can work. At one time, I have a privilege to work a very known German journalist who works for ZDF TV station. He's an anchor, and he had a privilege, to interview a number of politicians, and he's really respected in Germany. So when I was arrested, he took it personally, my case, and I heard after my release, he is almost every week called the foreign minister of Germany. We just met each other while he came to Addis Ababa to work. I was a co-producer of their documentary. But he is personally insisted, and he advocated on behalf of me to the German government. And the German government is really pressurizing their ambassadors to attend every trial of my appearance at the court. It seems like the journalists doesn't have any power, but they have. They interviewed a number of political figures, and they are really respected by a number of people. So they can use their power, their leverage, to push every time. If 2-3 people are doing this thing consistently, what will be the outcome?
And I think that is as good a place as any to leave the discussion with much to continue talking about, thinking about, and fighting for. Thank you to the two of you for being so generous, and thank all of you for your solidarity and presence here today.